Hey, this is Frank. You're listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. Do you ever feel like you have friends who sometimes just don't get each other? This is a podcast that I recorded with two of my friends, Jake and Noah. We find out the hard ways we struggle to communicate better and sometimes succeed, but sometimes not. For years, the three of us have talked about communication and how it's sometimes easier said than done. Even when we're trying to be understanding, our well-meaning intentions often get lost in translation. We decided to share these conversations with the world. Join us as we find out what happens when three friends try to learn how to really talk to each other. I apologize about that.
The actual recording is higher quality. Welcome to WWZ. Thank you. Thanks, guys. You know, I was thinking the other day that, no, seriously, come on. No, thank you for having me.
If we don't make use of that long-ass applause a lot in the podcast, we're missing something.
Well, I just realized, like, that has to give you, like, a God complex to just say things and have everybody love it. I mean,
that was the goal. I'm glad it worked.
What a rush.
Did you see his face? Yeah. Look at his face.
Well, I imagine
he's having trouble. He has a real primal, like, that many people do love me response right now.
Well,
I know.
Think about this, though. Well, I put myself on stage. And if you think about yourself, like, as a comedian or something like that, I mean, there are lots of different ways that you can present your art. Some people do it in a gallery. You've got paintings on a wall. You watch people walk around, and I guess, like, as the artist, you're like, how long did they really look at that painting? I guess they liked it. You know, as a musician, yeah, people are dancing to your music. That's awesome. But, like, as a comedian, to say, I really honed this joke and I get to see in real time the response, I am awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, they did that for you saying WWZ.
I know. I just chose a different letter. Like, that was the whole joke. It was great.
Yeah, it's good. I enjoyed it.
I mean, humans really are social animals, you know?
Humans?
Animals?
Humans. Hummus?
It's interesting how all three of us had a reaction to the applause, but only Jake had that one.
Yes.
What was your reaction?
I laughed at how long it was.
Yeah. I was like, wow, that's long.
I honestly thought that it was a go until Frank presses stop thing.
Oh, no.
Just a loop.
No. It doesn't even tell you how long.
But Jake, I think, I can't remember, it was so long ago, but I think Jake actually went.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did do that with my hands. I also made a stop it sort of, motion.
I saw it.
Yeah.
The second part for sure.
It was definitely.
I can't remember about the first part either. It's been so long.
It was definitely a visual joke. So I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
And it's going to sound offensive. You're going to think that I hate you.
That's great, man. I like those.
Yeah. So I hear you talk a lot about your systems. And you have a lot of them. You have a lot of automations. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. That whole idea I've heard you say often, right? So you've got a lot of these things.
I've never said that.
You've absolutely said that.
James Clear said that. I told you I like that book.
Oh, no, I think that was Alex Hormozy.
James Clear was quoting.
Alex Hormozy says everything James Clear says.
That's absolutely true, but he never credits him. James Clear, however, credits someone else for that. But I'm saying...
He does?
Yeah.
Nuh-uh.
No, I literally just listened to
Roosevelt or something? Who?
No, his name is like... I don't remember the guy's name. but I just listened to a conversation between James Clear and Sam Harris this morning in which he stated this, and he definitely quoted it as someone else.
I'm just going to Google James Clear real quick. Hold on a second.
You don't know who it is?
No.
Oh, it's a really good book. You should read.
Okay, that's the Atomic Habits guy. I've heard of that book. I actually have listened to some of that book.
Well, I figured we are a podcast of three guys, and if we haven't mentioned Atomic Habits yet, we are failing.
Yeah, we do need an Atomic Habits episode.
I think I got the audiobook and I started listening to it, and I think I made it a chapter and a half, and I was like, eh.
Really?
Yeah, it is a really good book. But James Clear on October 3rd, 2018, tweeted, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And he does not attribute this to anyone else at
That's
that
weird.
time.
That is plagiarism. James, you plagiarized.
What did he tweeted again about it? Oh, he said, "This is a quote from my new book, Atomic Habits, and was adapted from one of my favorite sayings by the Greek poet Archilochus."
Oh, yeah. Archilochus.
"We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training."
Nice.
So different.
Yeah, a little bit different.
All right. Do you have a question in this question?
No, I was just gonna talk for a while.
No, you told me there was going to be an offensive question.
Yeah. So, one of the things that worries me about automations and these external systems is that, to me, it feels like exporting my consciousness. And I have enough anxiety that I simply don't trust these things to do what I need them to do. So I'm like just constantly kind of going through the to-do list in my head, just part of my experience. Last week, one of your automations failed and you had a moment, I wouldn't call it a panic moment, but you had to do something like at the last minute and catch up with something. Does that happen? Like, do you feel dependent on those automations and systems and things?
What a layered set of question.
How do you use systems?
What'd you say?
Are you offended?
No.
Well, like this whole thing started.
Can you try to offend me more?
Yeah, this whole thing started when you said Slack like pushes workflows into your life and things like this.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just curious, like, how do you use external systems like that? Do you just kind of like wait until they put something in front of your face and then you do it? Or how do you set it up?
Okay. I get the question. Do you remember what we talked about? We talked about why I use systems the other day when we were walking around the watershed, and I gave some specific example of something that I thought was a difference between me and Jake and how we handled anxiety related to systems. But
this is fascinating. You really had that conversation?
Huh?
You really had that conversation?
Yeah, we did.
It wasn't a conversation about you. I don't actually remember.
Yeah.
No, I just think it's funny because I attributed it to a level of anxiety as well. And I think it's funny that we're thinking about it in similar terms anyway.
You think the systems increase anxiety for me?
No, not at all.
You think they do for you?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying I don't trust them.
Yeah.
Implicitly. And the reason for that is I have anxiety about exporting my consciousness, is the way I would put it. Like it's similar. I mean, we do this and we've done this as long as we've been humans. Like, it used to be that there was no writing. You had to remember poems and the orators would do this, right? Later on, we used to remember people's telephone numbers. We no longer do that. We store them in our phones, right? So there are levels of exporting consciousness that we do on a daily basis, but this is the work I have to do today sort of thing, I feel very uncomfortable letting that go. Instead, I've got like a running tally in my head, and I check off the to-do list items as I go through the day.
You're listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. In these episodes, we're learning. We don't know what we're doing yet, and sometimes it shows. We think there's beauty in being a beginner, and we're learning from them, so we publish them. So thanks for listening, and rest assured that there will be better Unbecoming Platypus podcasts ahead. Yeah, so for me, it's like I value mental freedom highest. Do you have something you want to say first?
No, I was just going to say I know why. I know the basic sort of psychological reason I don't like systems, which has to do with, when you break it down, I guess my Enneagram type, which is I don't like to feel controlled. And systems in some way make me feel like I'm not in control of what I'm doing.
Yeah. All right. I like that. I don't disagree with that. I work pretty hard to make sure that the systems I use for consciousness related tasks, which, I mean, I think that's an important distinction to start with, is I do not want that the trash needs to go to the curb on Thursday in my consciousness. It is a task. Mm-hmm. So I have a system for things like that.
I vaguely remember this around the watershed, but I don't remember what your example was. But I'm going to keep thinking about it. Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So something like that doesn't belong in my consciousness. I don't want it, and it actively pulls me away from creativity that could exist, like to spend energy on, oh, it's Thursday, I gotta like keep this in the tally, that doesn't work for me. It doesn't make me the best I could be. So that belongs in something like Todoist, but then, and that just keeps it totally out. And then as far as
the idea being like a recurring task, I'm just going to get alert for that whenever it's time to do it.
Yeah, right.
The worst that could happen is it doesn't go off and I missed putting the trash out for the week.
Right. Yeah.
But then do you jump right on it when the alert goes off?
So, yeah, usually Reclaim picks it up from Todoist, puts it on my calendar in an open spot.
You put your trash on your calendar?
100%.
Weird.
No, this is it. This is great. This is like what I'm looking for.
Sure.
You talk about all these systems and apps and things all the time, but I don't really know how you use them.
Sure. I don't think most people would want to use them the way I do. I just really value having nothing on my mind. So that's sort of the driving force between having multiple systems. Anyways, Reclaim is what failed. So, this podcast is not responsible by Reclaim, who failed to put the thing on at the right time.
This feels like a self-referential joke for this podcast. How many different apps has Frank used that didn't work quite the way they were supposed to? And then this podcast is not sponsored by them.
Yeah, that's right. Slack?
I feel like there was...
The list will keep growing because he uses all of them.
Yeah. We also talked about the one that gives you speech feedback.
Oh, Poised. Yeah.
Poised. Yep. We're not sponsored by Poised.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I'm very good sort of product visionary is that I'm highly unsatisfied by software.
Yes.
It's the reason I can make great software. It's just not good enough yet. Although all these tools are very good, they're not good enough. They could be better.
Yeah. This is the conversation you and I were having about Instacart versus grocery shopping. Like, this is a thing that doesn't feel okay to you. And technically, if I think about it, it doesn't feel great to me either, but I just don't think about it. And I think it's so cool. I took the Understand Myself test yesterday, and at the top, it's got this paragraph and it says, just so you know, there is an adaptive way to use every single trait on this. It might seem negative to you, but it's actually positive. And I love that. It's like unsatisfied. It has this connotation of bad, but it's not. Like, that makes you very good at what you do.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's also a weakness, and it should be like thought of as a weakness too, at least for me personally. You know, if someone's like, how's your app at this? I'm like, could be better, but there's not a better one on the market. But my response is, yeah, it could be better.
Sure.
So that's a weakness, I suppose, too. Anyways, all right. So that's all. Like, I want those things to be as automated as possible. These are recurring tasks. I know that the outcome, they're not particularly like goal-driven activity, although there are some, and I'm curious how you get to the point where you work out every morning without thought, because that seems offloaded from consciousness too. But maybe you have to think about it in the morning. I don't know.
I think it's more routine.
At this point, it's more routine. I mean, if you want to go back to Atomic Habits, like at one point, it was concerted effort to think, oh, am I going to work out today? Am I not? That's like an in the moment question. Sure. And then, he talks about these identity-based habits, at which point it's no longer a thought. It's just an action that reaffirms who you believe yourself to be. I'm a person who works out every day. And there is still this question when I work out or when I wake up, like, I want to pay attention to my body, because at some point I even offloaded that from my consciousness. It was, I feel terrible. I have no energy, but I'm a person who works out. So I do it. And now I've got this question in my mind. Do I need to take a rest day? And sort of equal and opposite to that initial question.
Sure.
But it leads to balance. It's like a feedback loop.
Yeah. So for those things that aren't so task driven, each morning I look at my goals overall, which I just have like some sort of intentionality based outcomes I want in life. And I just try to identify like what the most important thing I could do towards that today is. And then I also throw that in Todoist. And I sort of keep track of whether or not I do those things and like what might have gotten in the way, so that I will fix it or get rid of it. If it wasn't important enough to do, then just stop integrating it in my life. But
interesting.
Those I do like to have sort of in my consciousness and really thinking about. So
like what happened last week? Was it okay with you that, okay, let me rephrase this question. It seemed to me, and I could be wrong about this could be a wrong assumption, that the task that you had to do, in which Reclaim failed and to notify you, was set for the day that it was due. And like for me, my level of anxiety would be like, no, that needs to be 2 days ahead in case something fails, and then I've got a day to make it up, sort of thing. Like, that's the way my brain works. So like, how do you respond to that? Do you change the system in some way? Or do you say, no, it was fine. It's 99% of the time it works, and I shouldn't have to run into this again?
I mean, it really depends on how much it happens. But like, I do try to keep my mind free so that I can respond to the real needs of life, which at the moment was that.
Sure.
It didn't really distress me. It just was sort of annoying to have it under pressure, because it didn't have to be under pressure, but it was the only thing I had under pressure to do. So it was fine.
Gotcha.
I do think I will change the system. I started looking at, because I have had a couple other Todoist Reclaim integration problems lately. So I'm evaluating a different to-do app. I've also had Todoist issues with another app too that I use. So their API is having a lot of problems lately. And I don't think it was, maybe it wasn't Reclaim. Maybe it was a Todoist side problem. But.
Yeah. See, I think that I have a similar sort of value system when it comes to mental energy, We obviously do it differently, and I have a different level of anxiety that bring these things back to my mind more often. But if we go back to trash, this is like a task-based thing. I wouldn't say I ever think about it, but I also pretty much never forget it. Something on Wednesday, I look over and I say, oh, trash needs to go out. And I mean, now what's really cool is if we want to talk about habit stacking, I mow on Wednesday and I want the trash cans out of the way whenever I'm mowing. So I move them out when I do that. Even before that though, like on Wednesday, something in my brain would say, hey, this needs to be out. And I, if it wasn't out yet, I'd do it. So like, I think the level of fidelity there, like it scares me because my system is not in place if I fail. But at the same time, it doesn't seem to fail. It's sort of that thing I'm talking about with memory. Like I know Noah's phone number by heart, even though I've got it in my phone now. And it makes me wonder at a broader level for humanity, like as we export consciousness, are we forgetting that our brains are actually kind of good at this?
Yeah, it could be. It's definitely a balance.
Yeah.
I sort of hate exhaustive to do systems, like getting things done or something like this. I'm going to put all of my thoughts into something and then try to manage this for life. Like there's just, I have 30 projects and 600 tasks in there or something. That's madness to me. I think that like the offloading system you use should like involve being alive as a human and like what are your most important priorities. And I don't know if it's over 30 items. That seems insane.
Yeah, it is. And I think the scale really is probably why these systems have become more necessary. Like as humanity progresses, civilization progresses, the strains that we have on our lives, the things that we have to remember and keep straight have become so exorbitant to the extent that like our brains are not naturally evolved to keep track of that many things. We're capable of it. Again, thinking back to memory, the Greeks used to use this technique called the memory palace. And it was like because our visual and spatial memory is far more concrete than conceptual abstract memory. So for instance, there's like a thing that happens every year. It's a convention in which people try to remember the order of a deck of cards. And they'll put 5 decks of cards on top of each other and they'll remember every single card in order for 250 cards. And like average everyday people do this and they remember it by basically walking through this palace. Okay, I'm walking up the steps and I see an ace of spades. I'm walking into the foyer and I see, this other thing. And I just go through that journey in my mind. And so the Greeks would actually use this type of thing and construct a memory palace to remember things like long poems and stories of this nature. As we've introduced things like writing, well, now I don't have to do that. I just put it on and I can read it in the order that I want to. So that's sort of what I mean whenever I think about these systems and exporting consciousness. I'm taking a task that my brain used to be able to handle, and I'm essentially increasing my capacity as a human and increasing the amount of work that I can do by introducing technology.
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to keep in mind like what kind of person you are, and like this should be a part of your systems. I play a lot with the idea of writing, and some days I put all my tasks into Todoist. Like I just see what's on today and what's come in there, and then what I've added based on my sort of priorities in life. And then I just write that down on a list. And it seems like the physical act of writing makes it so that I do not need to reference Todoist again that day. I don't know why. I don't look at the list again either. Just the actual act of writing. And I think Beethoven did this actually. He had just stacks and stacks of notebooks that he never used again. But he said when he wrote things down, he never needed to read them again. They were in his memory. So I don't know. I think some people probably do better with audio than, they could just voice note it and it would be meaningful to them or something. But you got to figure out what works for you and do that.
Yeah.
I don't think my system's right
like
for everyone.
You've still got a level of executive functioning in there. Like your system brings it back up and says, hey, this is what past you decided was important. Present you, is that still your priority list, or do you want to pull something forward and change it up for the day?
For sure. Yeah. I have like overarching goals, and then I have a top priority for each. And, those are all subject to change. But
yeah. No, you mentioned, we were talking about Slack and automations and stuff like that. And you're like, well, I don't want this to export from my email into the project management system. And you kind of refer to that as like this control thing. It doesn't take more time for me to do this manually or something. Misunderstanding that?
No, there's an element of that. I think when I listened to Frank talk about his, the automation system and the task that failed the other day and putting things each morning into the Todoist and all this stuff, that just feels like more work to me. That feels like more tasks. And I'm like, why would you replace tasks with tasks? That's kind of how my brain works. But I also have, I have a similar brain as yours. I remember things. I rarely forget anything. I sort of always have a mental checklist of things that need to be done, sort of automatically prioritizes. I don't put a lot of thought process into it. It just happens. I don't like notifications. I already was thinking about having to be here to record, and the reminder that goes off 30 minutes before gives me some level of annoyance. I wouldn't say anxiety, but annoyance for sure. I'm like, why is this going off? I already know I've got to be there. You know what I mean? That sort of thing just doesn't work well with my brain. It makes me feel, I don't know, it feels redundant. It feels annoying. It feels unnatural to me.
I agree with you on that. I have notifications only on meetings with other humans. Tasks don't notify me. I just see them on a calendar view.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying one's right or one wrong. I'm just telling you how I feel about it.
I mean, I'm just saying I agree with you. I hate notifications.
I also don't take the time to go try to turn that notification off because that feels like something else to do.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I feel like I've desensitized myself to notifications, which is not great. If you want to have important things actually alert you, trash, less important. Meeting with my client, more important. So for me, I do go to the trouble of taking notifications off things that don't matter, because if I see them pop up on my phone, it's a trigger for me to just slide that thing out of the way. And I don't want that. I have not given control to those notifications, but there's a level that you have to give them some sort of authority. And when every notification is not important, then even the important ones get lost.
Right. Yeah. I have very strong control over notifications. It basically needs to be a human that is intentionally interacting with me, a meeting that I committed to, or some reminder related to very important priority for me. These are the only things that notify me.
Yeah. And again, I keep thinking about scale. How many things are you really trying to keep track of at any given point in time? For the last year or so, the company I've been with as a project manager, I keep a to-do list basically, and then I kind of triage those every morning whenever I come in and say, okay, these are the 5 important things. And if I have more time, I'll get to some other things. And that's great because generally speaking, the to-do item for any given project kind of tells me what stage in the project we're in, who the owner of that task is, and essentially what I need to do. And what I'm realizing, though, is that we've also experienced a great deal of growth, which means that at this point I'm managing, 5 probably long-term projects that are going to take 2 to 3 months to complete. Really got to, pay attention to where we're at in that cycle. And then 20 to 30 smaller projects. And at this point, I'm still kind of where Noah's at. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I just remember. I just know where it's at. But there is this creeping anxiety that says we're about to reach the tipping point. We're about to reach the place where you're going to miss something. And that's not going to be great. So in the background, I've got this sub process that's going like, all right, what sort of system can I implement that is just this one extra step? It's move a chess piece whenever you do the task. And then I've got like this big Kanban board or something that says this project is in this phase and this one's in this phase. And just like one authoritative control center or something.
Why did you say Kanban?
I'm sorry, man. I think you hate project management, like because of all the systems.
Well,
do you mean why didn't he say Kanban?
Right.
Yeah,
no,
that's what I meant.
Gotcha. My sincere apologies. Sometimes I channel my inner Canadian and had some maple syrup this morning.
You just sound unintelligent to me.
Did you have maple syrup this morning?
What are you saying about Canadians?
I need to know about the syrup, though. Is
it syrup or is it syrup?
I'm done with this. I don't need to know anymore. Yeah. So it was completely adaptive add-on for me. I used to do everything from memory as well. But the more teams you interact with, the more projects you're involved in, the more just randomness that comes into your day with people sending you a message that says, hey, can you check this? And you say, yeah, sure. And then you go back to what you were doing and you forget about it. And tomorrow you're like, crap, I never checked the thing I said I'd check. That's why tasks go in systems for me. But
yeah, there was recently an update to our CRM. And by recently, I mean on Friday. What a great day to implement a giant change to the system.
Definitely.
It was a change to the entire organizational structure of quotes, conversations, all these different things. I can't find anything right now. Like it is a full foundational level shift in the way that you use the application. There was no warning to this. There seems to be no button that says take me out of beta.
Legacy mode, please. Yeah.
Yep. None of that.
Cool.
And this is Kitchen. We are not sponsored by Kitchen. And I realized just looking through some emails later that I had missed 2 conversations because they were nested in this structure that made no sense to me. And that kind of like reaffirmed this idea that as soon as you see something, you need to throw it over there so that later Jake can pick it back up.
Yeah. If I had a high number of those as a part of my job, I used Post-it notes. Like that's the system I used when I had like tons of that, every 5 minutes I was getting some new thing I needed to check on or do. I just put on a Post-it note, pulled it off the tab, did another one.
Yeah. I have a Trello board that I use as Post-it notes basically. Sure. It's like just create one of those and I can drag it in the doing bucket whenever it's time.
Yeah. Yep. Post-it notes are good because they work for phone calls for they work for 3 people messaging you at the same time. You can just make at least a 1-word note or something that'll remind you. But I do think if you have a job like this, you should leave it.
What do you mean?
Where you're getting 3 new tasks every 5 minutes.
Oh, yes.
To try to keep track of. But they should hire more people than have you do 5 jobs. But
yeah,
some organizations do be like that.
Well, yeah. If it is a well-established organization that's been around for a long time, I agree. That's like this idea that, and wow, there's so much that I'm thinking about here, but like when I'm doing a job, I want to make sure that I am logging the amount of time it actually took to do that job or would take a normal person under given circumstances, because later when we go and run that report, I want it to say, this is what is possible in 40 hours.
Sure.
Not, I gave it everything I had and I was stressed to the max and I wasn't sleeping well at night and I put a couple extra hours in that I didn't log. And that's how we accomplish this work, because you need that to be realistic. You need it to be reflective of reality later on. So like what I'm thinking is, if you have a well-established company that's been around for a while and they say, this is the capacity of this role. We want you to work 40 hours a week for a salary. Really, it takes 55. Like, that's problematic. If you're in a growth phase for a startup or something like that, and you're having these conversations and saying, hey, currently it's taking 45 hours to get, this work done every week. We should probably start thinking about how to, change where these responsibilities lie.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's taking 50. Yep. Let's get a job description out there and start looking to hire.
Yeah. And I have all kinds of thoughts about this really, but if you are doing meaningful work that's purpose driven in sort of sprints, like I am all for overworking or losing your work-life balance or something. Like, this is really important. We need to get this feature done. Everyone's on board. And then right after that, like next week's going to be pretty light.
Yes.
Thank you for, doing that. And now enjoy some relaxed time, like whatever. But a lot of companies aren't driven this way. But
right.
I think a lot of humans are. And I think the company benefits from sort of taking on sprints like that, but cycles.
I'm with you. I think as long as it's like novel and it's intermittent, I think that's good. I think about the fact that on the hierarchy of need, you have food, shelter, water, these basic human needs. Once you have that, you need some sort of consistency. You need to make sure that the food, water, shelter that you have isn't going to run out tomorrow. Once you have that consistency, what you actually need is inconsistency to live like a fulfilled life. You need the novelty, the hormetic stress, essentially, that causes you to grow. Otherwise, there's no direction in life. And I always found that interesting that the second and third seem to be in competition with each other. I need consistency. I need inconsistency. But that's just what it is to be human. And I think that, in a work environment, sometimes all banding together and saying, hey, we got to get some extra work in, guys, and you're all pulling together as a team, that's a great bonding experience. That's what you would be doing in your off time anyway. And it's what makes work feel less like work.
Yeah.
I'm cool with it.
Do we have some sort of summary, or what is everybody looking at me for?
It's your turn to talk.
About what?
Anything you'd like?
Yes. We done here?
Hey, it's Frank again. Thanks for listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. You can also check us out online at theunbecomingplatypus.com. We hope these conversations inspire you to improve your communication skills and deepen your connections with your own friends and loved ones. Until next time, this has been the Unbecoming Platypus podcast.